The train at platform 5 is the 0903 LNER Azuma service to Leeds.
Hello, I'm Harry Bucknell. Thank you for downloading Human Not Heroic, the podcast from Blesma, the limbless veterans. In this edition of Human Not Heroic, telling the reality, the everyday, and the how of life for our limbless veterans, I head north to Leeds to meet with Mark Smith, who served in the Coldstream Guards, and before the age of 21, had seen operational service in Northern Ireland, the Gulf, and Bosnia. I have known Mark for over 30 years. In the Balkans, he was my signaller. As you'll hear, the years since have not been kind to Mark, who, thanks to diabetes, is now a right leg through knee amputee, and, as of 3 months ago, also a left leg below knee amputee, confined to a wheelchair. To walk again is his goal. A trained counsellor himself, Mark's mantra remains that a positive attitude equals a positive outcome. This is his story.
Any questions?
No.
So we'll start at the beginning, really. Mark, it's great to see. The last time we were together was in Germany, and since then you come a long way. You have qualified as a post-traumatic stress counsellor. Tell us a bit about that.
So, I was diagnosed with PTSD when I left the army, so it was about, I'd say, 24 years ago now. So, I was quite wayward. I couldn't find my way. That led me into deep depression and that. I ended up homeless. So I was bin diving for food. I had nowhere to live and that, so I was sleeping rough for a while and that and I ended up attempting suicide. So with the suicide attempt, what had happened was I had to see a psychologist. So the psychologist started working with me and that and it turns out that he was working, towards working with veterans. And where I was diagnosed then with PTSD as a result of my military service, we got to the bottom of where my anger issues were coming from, and why I couldn't function normally in what we call normal society now, because I still had that military mentality. I was quite high strung when I was in the army and that, so everything for me was geared around doing my best. And it was always, I like to drink, I like to go out, I like to have fun, but I also like to fight as well. That was one of my things. And I just never got a grasp of that, coming out and being a normal functioning person. I worked on the doors, worked as a bodyguard, I were doing various other jobs as well, which I think led me into a bit of criminality. And everything just took a tumble for me, and as I say, ended up with a suicide thing. Now, working forward from that, started working with the psychologist. We were looking at the ways of which I could improve my life and understand better what had happened with me. Then I started looking at what PTSD and what trauma was, in particular from ex-forces, but I never fully grasped the thing around how it affected other people as well around me, so I was quite self-centered with myself, and he showed me a different way of looking at things. I was talking about certain things and the way that Bosnia affected me. Now, Bosnia affected me in a way that I couldn't understand the things that were going on over there and that and make sense on it. As we spoke earlier, about the kids and stuff as well, that had quite a profound effect on me. Anyway, I was kind of relaying things, and this therapist, I use that word loosely with him, he said, I don't understand this military thing. He says, I'm going to stop the session, and he actually left the room and I didn't see him again. He wouldn't come back in and that So I was halfway through a session, he'd stopped it and kind of threw it all back onto me, so you know, and I thought there's got to be more to this, you know, than what I've just gone through there. Now that led me then into looking at therapy and looking at different types of therapies and what was out there, and I wasn't impressed with that world, in fairness, and I thought if he could do that to me, then what's it like for other veterans? You know, what are other veterans going through? Now, I mention about veterans specifically because that was where my head was, where my mind was, and the focus of what I wanted to do was to look after veterans and have them not go through the things that I went through, in particular the homelessness, the anger issues, you know, and having someone there to sort of talk to that was aware of them issues and has been through them. Now, I wasn't fully through it myself, but what I wanted to do was start to make that impression and that. Now, everywhere I turned to try and work with organisations or to get a foot in the door, I was turned away. This was from some of the big organisations as well, and they turned me away because they said, you've got no paperwork.
Which you have now. You've got your maths, you've got your English.
So, yeah.
And behind you is a picture of a great big smiling chap with his mortarboard and gown on. That's you getting your degree.
I got accepted into 4 different universities, and I chose Bradford University as the one I wanted to go to do counselling and psychology in community settings. So, yeah, I did that, and I got a 2-1 at university, so that's a good grade.
Then you got the bad news that you got diabetes. What do you think triggered the diabetes off?
I think it was a lot to do with me and the way that I was living when I left the army. Diabetes was diagnosed quite a long time before that, actually, so that was in 2011. I went on a walk with a veterans charity, and we went from John O'Groats to Land's End. I knew there was some issues then when I was walking. Shin splints being quite a prevalent one in that light, you know, doing a lot of walking on that light, or a lot of miles. And pains in my feet, you know, the pins and needles were starting and that light, so I knew something was happening, but I didn't know what. But all them years on, I started getting severe issues with my feet where I had no feeling, basically. You know what I mean? It was like walking with a dead foot sometimes.
Yeah.
And I knew then that things were happening, so I ended up with a cut on my big toe on my right hand foot, and I never noticed it. I never felt it, and you know, the first time I noticed it was when I wasn't feeling well. And then I recognised, you know, it's kind of an overnight thing. It had gone from looking like a normal toe to, we best explain it like an old sausage. Didn't look right. I went to hospital with sepsis then, and that, to be honest, that nearly killed me, did that.
Yeah.
So even the wife, while I was at hospital, they told her, you know, just, you might need to be with him in that light, you know, because it's that serious. Anyway, the toe came off, and I went through 8 major surgeries to get to the point of where I am now with a through knee. So that was the toe come off. So with a through knee, like, you keep the full femur, so the whole of the bone. If it was an above knee, the femur would be cut at the lower part. So with this one, I keep my kneecap, I keep the full femur, and I'm able then to walk on my knee as well, which gives me an advantage over, you know, the above knee. Some can walk on them and that, like, they find the stability or the strength in, you know, to be able to do that, but that was a big thing for me.
A planned amputation, which didn't always go quite right, did it? Just for the first amputation, what were your feelings then? How did you cope with that?
Well, it's strange, isn't it? Because I was already working as a counsellor, and I'd worked with a couple of guys, ex-forces, that had amputations. One was a double amputee, and one was a triple amputee. So he had his, I think it was his left arm, and both legs below knee. The other guy had 2 below knee amputations and stuff. So I was working with them in so much as that I was working with them for free. There was no charge to these guys, because I wanted to learn a bit more as well, and they were quite happy to be a part of that process for me learning as a counsellor and that, like, and to work with what their expectations were and what their experiences were. Because for me, if I'm working in an area, I need to have a full understanding of it, and I don't need it to be from just a book that I've picked up at university and that. It's about life experiences. So because I'd worked with them, I had a good understanding of their mindsets, how to train the brain as well, like, to overcome certain things, and that's what I was doing with this, So I knew for a fact when the toe come off and I had all the other issues that I was going to become an amputee. When I got into hospital and the foot had gone after the toe amputation, and that the foot had gone, and I knew then that there had to be some surgery further up. So I opted then for a below-knee amputation to start with, and
that didn't go easy, did it?
it didn't. No, it didn't. But when I got into hospital, it was the consultant come down. He says, we're going to have to take the leg off. He said, but it just depends on where and that. And I said, well, I want to go for a below knee. Here's my reasons why. And I explained them to him, and he goes, well, you seem to have a good handle on this now, like he said. And he said, so what we need to do then is discuss when we're going to do it. I said, so when are you free? He said, I'm free tomorrow. I said, it's a date. I said, let's do this. He laughed, he had his core there with him, and he said, I wish I were all like this. And I thought to myself, that's just nice to hear, is that, you know what I mean, that I do have an handle on it. I do have a relative sort of idea of what's going to come from this because of these guys that I've worked with. I said that was important to me at that point, that, you know what I mean, that these people had helped me out. This all piles into the later side of me, really, but and that's all about having people there that understand or have been through it, you know what I mean, and that to mould the way that I feel and I think, and that's been one of the ethoses is around the way that I deal and work with people. If I'm working with somebody, and that quite often it's because I've been there myself. Now that doesn't give me all the answers when I'm working with somebody, okay, but it gives me an understanding and it gives me something to work from. And the majority of the people that have come to me have said they've come to me purely because of my past experiences in that area.
You talk about you advertise on your website. You say positive attitude equals positive outcomes. How did you talk yourself out through the first amputation?
I learnt that from the psychologist that I started working with, and my attitude at that point was terrible. You know what I mean? I didn't have a positive outcome. I didn't have a good outlook on life. And obviously from the attempted suicide, I didn't want to be a part of life and living anymore. So I took that on board, and it kind of didn't make sense to me at first. It was, yeah, whatever, this is just like your speak. But it's something that stayed with me. And I think, you know, that having a positive outcome is about training a brain. It's all about having a good mindset, you know, working forward. And a mindset is something that you can train to be better and better and better, but you have to have the building blocks to be able to do that.
Yeah.
So,
but that in some ways is, I'm going to make what might appear to be a rather crass comment, but it's easy when you have one leg off. But then the news came you had to have the second leg off. That, I know for you, was a hard thing to do. How did you keep going doing that?
I keep telling people, and I get that question, how do you manage? How do you get through that? For me, it's about, I've got no choice. The leg's coming off. What do I need to do about it? I like to think about having being a couple of steps ahead of the game, if you like. So the leg's got to come off. It's not about the leg coming off. It's about what do I do next, and what do I have in place again. You know what I mean? So having the first leg off, I know that I had the physio. I know that I had occupational therapists. I also knew that I had prosthetists as well, like, you know, to be able to manage my expectations about being able to walk again. And with that in mind, I reached out to them. You know, we had a big meeting. My wife was there at the time and that, and I wanted her to have an understanding of where my mind was. Now, I'm not going to say like it's been easy, because I talk this, you know, when I'm talking to people about, yeah, I did this because, and it was, you know, I managed to get through it and that. But I've sat on the bed countless times and that, like, with my head in my hands and shed a tear or two. But that's for me, it's around loss and grieving for the things that I can't do anymore. I can't run anymore. You know what I mean? Or maybe I can, I don't know. But my mind at the time didn't take me that far forward.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I'll climb a mountain again. One of the first things that I said when I had the first leg off was the consultant asked me, he said, what's your next step now? What have you got planned? He said, it's important that you have something or a goal to work towards. And I says, well, I'm going to walk again and I'm going to climb a mountain. And I always remember that.
And
when
did
he
you?
said, yes, I did. Yeah. When he said that and I put that and I says, I'm going to do that. And he went, I'd like to hear about that when you do it. What that did for me then, it kind of gave me this thing. I've got to tell him now, so I've got to do it, you know. And it's that the proverbial kick up the arse that I think that I needed, that most people need as well. So me and my brother did it. We went up Mount Snowdon. Now I trained when I was younger and that, like I went for a course like with selection, special forces. So I did a lot of training. And one of the things I did, I went up Snowdon 4 times. I went up and down Snowdon with kit on 4 times in one day. And I felt quite good about that, you know what I mean? It was a part of my training routine that I did. And when we got to the bottom of Mount Snowdon, I had the prosthetic on. It was 5:30 in the morning. This is me and my brother. It was summertime. It was lovely. It was August. It was actually on my anniversary and that, like, so the wife kind of let me go for that one. And I said to my brother, stood at the bottom, it's Lamberry's Path, there's a cattle grid there. And I just looked at him, I said, what the fuck are we doing? What am I doing? and he just looked at me and he goes, Mark, you know there's a train that goes up and down Snowdon. He said, we can cut loose now, we'll go for a breakfast and then we'll get train up and take picture at top. And no one will ever know that you got the train. And for me and that, like, it was the old, like, you know, I've got to go home now. Yeah, this pride factor and that. And he just looked at me and he went, yeah, I thought you'd say that. So, yeah, the bastard got me. So we set off and we did it. And that, and I've got to say, it's got to physically the hardest thing I've ever done. Because I wasn't that young soldier anymore. And I keep referring back to that as, you know, what I had to what I am now, like, you know, but that moulded me. I think if I didn't have that training side of things and that mentality still, even after all these years, now I'm 53 now, then I don't think I would have even ventured, you know, up that mountain.
You spoke about the extra energy it requires being loss of one limb. That you reckon is a 40 to 50% extra energy it requires just to keep yourself going. Now you've lost 2 limbs. That's 60 to 70% extra energy requirement. That requires a huge amount of strength, requires a huge amount of intake of food. How do you keep that going?
A good wife who loves cooking. The food and the intake and stuff and that, bearing in mind I'm diabetic, so I have to be careful about what I eat now. But I'm going to make sure I eat the right things to keep my body working. You wouldn't put petrol in a diesel car, you know what I mean? I'm running on a different an individual fuel now that keeps me going, and I know what works for me. I think with the exercise side of things, I've got lovely green areas around me in a park. Is getting out and doing the right kind of walking, not overexerting and that, like. And again, like, I'm not in it to run marathons. I'm not in it to climb mountains. I'm in it to be able to get up and walk.
And then, you say, you talk about that, but earlier in the year, we spoke. You had news that you were going to have another amputation. Your left leg had to come off, and because the foot had collapsed. That must have come as a very hard blow to you. How did you deal with that? The positive attitude equals positive outcomes. How did you apply the template of what's coming next to that? Because here you are now, you're in a wheelchair, you answered the door to the wheelchair, you made a cup of tea for us in a wheelchair, you're coping, but you don't want to end up in a wheelchair, do you?
No. I apply the same sort of attitude or my mindset, you know, to just about everything that I do. My wife, I live with my wife, I live with my son, my youngest son who's 20 in December, my daughter who's nearly 17 next week, and they're fantastic. My son's working, my daughter's at college, but they want to do everything for me. You know, everything, and my wife will run around and you know, when all this happened. But the one thing that I need from everybody is that, again, a kick up the arse. If it just so much as making a cup of tea and that, like, is, can you make me a brew? No, make it yourself. You're able to do that, you know what I mean? Because I think it's very easy to fall into that trap of self-pity or negative worth, you know, that lack of ability, because although it's a disability, I've still got ability. I've still got the craving and the need to do for me. I work with a lot of people now that are going through, well, with amputees and that, like, and people that have had various other surgeries. And one of the things that I say to them is that you have an option, a choice to do here. Like, you can be one of two people. You can be a person who just sits down and watches the world go by, clicking your fingers for things to get done for you. Or you can be the type of person that fights for your own independence, for some degree of normality in life, and gets up and does. And I like to think I'm one of them sort of people, and that, like, not to say that clicking my fingers now and again doesn't happen and that, but I have good people around me that, as I say, give me that kick up the arse and say, no, do it yourself.
There must be times when it's just sheer frustration. How do you get around that?
I don't all the time. I don't. I've often asked just to be left alone for a while, you know, so that I can clear my head or go through them moments of. I think, yeah, it's feeling sorry for myself sometimes works, you know, and it's a good thing. It gives me that reality check, really, that that's not what I want to do. It's not who I want to be, but sometimes it's just the way it is, you know, that I will sit on the bed. I will have that moment alone, and that where I feel sad, you know, and I can express my emotions. I don't mind. I don't like doing that in front of people, but I can do it, you know, when I'm on my own. I've got coping skills and various things that I do, strategies, if you like, that I put in place or I have in place for when them moments happen. So I like music. I've got a great playlist. It's quite an eclectic mix as well. I've got everything on there, but it grounds me, if you like. It gets me to that point of wipe your tears away again, like, you know, and what do I do next? Again, what we're doing is I'm trying to sort of put that thing in that plan of, I'm here now, I'm okay with this is fine and that, but I've got to carry on now, so pick myself up and crack on again.
You remember Bessemer? I know that Bessemer have done great things in terms of your workspace and things like that. What support is having Bessemer around for you?
Unbelievable.
Your therapy work, your counselling work, presumably gives you something to live for.
Yeah.
It gives you a purpose in life. And as I sit to you now, here I'm talking to you now, you're in a wheelchair, you're limbless right now, and that is something it gives you purpose, but you're not going to be in this situation forever. What's happening next? What's next for Mark Smith?
I think we spoke before about it, haven't we? That sitting in front of a laptop, working with people is fantastic. I get to go out.
I'm thinking in terms of your physicality, or with you in your wheelchair now. That's something you don't want to presumably be.
I hate the wheelchair with a passion. The one love that I have for this wheelchair is it gives me a level of independence. You know, while I can't walk, I can get to do what I need to do. There are a lot of restrictions to this, but, you know, yeah, although I hate it, I don't like being in it. I don't like to be seen in it either, and that, like, it's just one of my personal things. What I want to be able to do is to be getting up and walking, to show people that, you know, from a wheelchair, it doesn't matter how many times you get knocked down, you know what I mean? There are ways and things, you know, means to move forward.
Now, you're if you like, you're at ground zero right now. How are we going to get? What's the pathway to get you mobile and up again on your legs?
So we spoke earlier about physio, which I'm going through at the moment. Prosthetics, which I've spoken about with the prosthetic department.
Yeah.
to get me up on my legs and that, like, it's still a part of the process now. I think for any amputee, you can ask them, like, you know, there are, I think, four main parts. So there's a recovery, takes time, and we're all different. This for me is taking longer than I'd like. But I've got to sort of have that patience and that again, a mindset basically, which is around my own circumstances. The physio side of things, they'll decide, like, yes, we can get you onto prosthetics and that, and then the prosthetic department will, you know, get me the prosthetics and make me what I need to be able to stand up and get going. I can't put a time scale on it. I don't think any amputee can, because things happen. You know, I've set myself back 6 weeks by knocking my leg and opening the stitches. These things are inevitable, I think, for a lot of people. I'm quite clumsy. You know, but I'm here now and I'm still moving forward with that hope that I can get up and walk.
Yeah, that's the plan.
Yeah.
We spoke a lot about, before the operation happening, about what was going to happen, what your plans for afterwards. You spoke about how you'd like to do things like inspirational talking and motivational talking, things like that. Have you thought much about that since?
Yeah, well, absolutely. I've got a story to tell. I think a good story as well, like, you know, so it's not just about my own things that I've been through, although that's very important, but I think the story to tell is about the other people around me, the people that I've worked with, and also the people that have inspired me. There are a number of amputees, you know, that, you know, Mark Ormrod, just won, Ben Parkinson. There's a lot of friends of mine as well, like, you know, I've got Mick Smith and a Cole Schremer, and that is an amputee. They're not all amputees that have happened during war. Some have happened, like myself, afterwards. But the story around the actual event of amputation, and then their story about resilience and what it's taken them to, you know, to be able to keep going and move forward is amazing. I attempted suicide many years back, and I think for a lot of people it's very easy to give up. You know, especially when they're facing such massive hurdles and that, to get back on 2 feet. Some never will, you know, but they keep going. Now, the public speaking side of things is about telling my story. Is about opening people's eyes to, you know, being at the lowest point, to getting to a point where they're actively living again, you know, and being parts of, you know, families and the wider thing. And that's important to me. Very important to be able to put that story or that word across, and also open people's eyes, able-bodied people as well, like, you know, to understand that we've gone through such a big journey, and I think some recognition to other amputees and other people with disabilities is seen. You know, the recognition that not everybody is disabled.
When you had your right leg amputated, you said you wanted to go and climb a mountain. If you had an objective, something you'd like to see yourself, that you could say that is the first step to achieving what you want to achieve with both legs off, what would that be? Just the first step, the first sign you're moving in the right direction. What would that be?
To be on them 2 legs.
Yeah.
I don't have any great expectation of what comes next, and I think for me it's important just to take one stage at a time now, and to make sure that I do it right. The first time when I wanted to climb the mountain, I said I'd do that in 6 months. It took me just over 2 years to get to that point.
Yeah.
Because I had a very unrealistic expectation, but this time's different.
Well, I'll tell you one thing, you look pretty good on it. We got Christmas coming up. What's your message to your fellow veterans and your fellow amputees at this time?
To look at what you've got around you. Think of other people in your life as well, like, and not just your circumstance. If it wasn't for my family, if it wasn't for my friends, if it wasn't for the people that care about me, I don't know where I'd be. So think of, it's Christmas. Think of the people around you and just sort of sharing the joy that everybody else brings.
It's Christmas time. Will you be having a drink?
No, stop drinking. Ain't that sad?
Mark Smith, thank you for being human, not heroic, but remarkable.
Thank you.
Great stuff.
And my thanks to Mark Smith for being my guest on the podcast. If you enjoyed listening to this programme and would like to learn more about the vital work the charity undertakes supporting our limbless veterans, or to make a donation, please visit blesma.org. And on behalf of Blesma, the limbless veterans, wherever this may find you, be it on operations, on leave, or at home, may I wish you all a very Merry Christmas. Do join us next month for another edition of Human Not Heroic, where I talk to Blesma's chairman, General Ed Davis. Meantime, from me, Harry Bucknell, thank you for listening, and farewell.
Your own time, go on.
I've heard that for a while. There's the journey of strength, and this is a point. The road was long, the path unclear, a life unsteady, now veiled in fear. A shadow cast upon my fate, as illness whispered, time to wait. The weight of loss, the cost so steep, a limb now gone, yet hope runs deep. Through pain and doubt I took each stride, with steady heart and soul untried. The phantom echoes called my name, yet through the hurt I rose the same. Each step uncertain, yet profound, a battle fought on shifting ground. As the storm began to wane, another trial, a fresh new strain. Yet knowing all that lay ahead, I stood with courage, fear I shed. No sorrow binds, no pain defines, a journey shaped by strength that shines. For through the trials weigh me down, I wear resilience like a crown.
Fab. Thank you.
Gabriel Fauré's Romance sans Parole No. 3, Opus 17, was played by the late Hiroshi Murakawa, available at piano1001.com, a classicals.de recording. A Christmas festival composed by Leroy Anderson was performed by the Band of the Grenadier Guards under the direction of Major Stuart Watts. With studio editing by Michael Siliano, this has been a Gamekeeper production for Blesma, the Limbless Veterans.